أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Amini Suwedi, and you're listening to the Murid Talks podcast. Welcome back to another solo episode of the podcast. And today, we'd be attempting to answer the question, is God perfect? This question usually takes many forms, such as, is God all good? Is God all merciful? Is God all just? All forms of this question merely try to investigate if God is perfect in all respects, and some dig deeper in their investigation to try and see if perfection in all respects wouldn't entail certain logical contradictions. An example of this will be, if God is all good, how is there evil in the world? Or, how can God be all merciful and all just at the same time? Hopefully, within the duration of this episode, we'll be able to answer these quandaries by taking the metaphysical view of reality. We have discussed metaphysics before, particularly in depth within the episode of Moses, but it wouldn't be hurtful to reiterate a few points. Metaphysics as such is that which comes beyond physics, here to be understood in the most general sense of that which pertains to nature, and by extension, manifestation. Metaphysics realizes universal principles which encompass all things in reality as expressed in the name universal. These universal principles cannot be viewed as distinct, nor in separation from the supreme principle which encompasses all things in essence. As such, perfection can be said to be a universal principle, which puts us within the metaphysical domain. Thus, we have to explore what perfection is from the arena of metaphysics. So, what is perfection? Like all universals, it is hard to express what they are because they elude our usual way of defining things and concepts. We can intuit what they are, but when asked to define them, we are usually lost for words. It is hard to use the more limited to express the less limited, even more so, the unlimited. Language, due to its limited nature as part of the individual domain, cannot directly express that which pertains to the universal domain. Rather, it can only allude to it. Generally speaking, we use the word perfect to describe things of a beautiful nature and beauty beyond the aesthetic understanding expresses the fullness or completeness of a thing. It is from this that imperfection is seen as a lack, a deprivation. So, rather than trying the futile exercise of defining perfection with some positive statement, I would prefer to use negation instead. I would express perfection as that which lacks nothing. Here, I'm not talking about the perfection of this or that particular thing, but rather perfection as such. Perfection lacks nothing, or is deprived of nothing. This reminds us of the concept of the infinite, which is expressed as that which has no limit and, by that very fact, excludes nothing from itself. In this sense, then, perfection will be synonymous with infinitude. Perfection, by lacking nothing, excludes nothing from itself, and from this we can say that nothing stands in opposition to it. because, by being that which encompasses all things, it is all there is, ultimately. In this sense, then, perfection could also be seen as a synonym to truth or reality. What about imperfection, then? Is it not the opposite of perfection? Well, from the universal perspective, no. If perfection is synonymous with the infinite in the metaphysical sense, it follows that imperfection will be synonymous with finitude or limitation. It would mean that whatever is limited in one way or another due to its nature is imperfect in some sense. Now, the unlimited or infinite, being that which encompasses all, cannot be said to be in opposition with the finite. We can say it is so linguistically, but that is as far as we can take it due to the inherent limitations of language itself. The infinite thus encompasses the finite, and we could say that the finite being in no common measure with the infinite, and by measure we don't mean by it quantitatively, is nil in comparison. It is only those that are finite that can be said to be in opposition, or viewed from a higher sense to be in complementarity, in that you can't have one without the other. The infinite, by its all-encompassing nature and self-sufficiency, is in need of nothing and stands in complementarity with nothing, as truly there is nothing apart from it. In this same sense, we could say that total perfection, lacking nothing in itself, stands in opposition with nothing. The imperfect, then, is merely a condition within perfection, or a conditioning of it. Conditioning here being synonymous with limitation. After expounding the metaphysical understanding on perfection, we can then use it to answer the question, is God perfect? Yes and no. Let me start with the no. If we view perfection as a separate concept attributable to the divine reality, then this would mean that there is perfection on one side as an attribute, and God on the other side as one endowed with such an attribute. This already presupposes a duality, and perfection, as presented above, is beyond duality, as it lacks nothing. In this sense, then, we could say that perfection includes God also. Now, I know this sounds heretical to most, and this is where the yes to our initial question comes in. To answer in the affirmative, we should be able to view things beyond distinction. Instead of seeing perfection and God as two separate concepts, we view them as one. The essence of Tawheed in Islam. It is not that there is perfection on one side and God on the other, but that God is perfection, or perfection is God. So, rather than say God is perfect, we say God is perfection. In that God lacks nothing in himself, encompasses all things, and by virtue of the negation of all limitation is self-sufficient. Or, vice versa, in virtue of his self-sufficiency, lacks all limitation. Which, in this sense, are one and the same thing. This could be similar to saying God lacks lack. Well, one could ask, isn't that a limitation? If perfection, or God, lacks nothing, yet we say he lacks lack, isn't that itself a lack? Well, as we said initially, perfection actually encompasses imperfection. Imperfection is a possibility included in perfection. So, in a sense, perfection doesn't even lack lack. So we could say that all imperfections are perfections, imperfections. It is by the perfect imperfecting itself that all things are brought about. So once again, imperfection doesn't escape perfection. It is in this sense that we can say that perfection is beyond all things, all particulars, as it is all there is, universally, beyond duality and deprivation, the infinite, the truth. But also, in all things, in that all things are merely the conditioning, the limitations, or determinations of it. So perfection is beyond all things and in all things. We read in Quran 42:11, quote, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ, end quote, there is nothing like unto him. We could view this statement in two ways. In view of God's transcendence beyond all things, we could say that due to the infinite reality, nothing stands in comparison, every limitation being nil in face of the unlimited. This reminds us of Quran 55:26-27, quote, everything upon it is in a state of perish, and there subsists the face of your Lord, owner of majesty and honor, end quote. As well as Quran 28:88, quote, and do not invoke with God another deity. There is no deity except him. Everything is in a state of perish except his face. His is the judgment, and to him you will be returned, end quote. The true subsisting reality is that of God, the infinite, the perfection, the truth. But Ibn Arabi, in view of God's immanence, God being in all things, has a second reading of the aforementioned verse. He translates or rereads the verse as, there is nothing like unto his likeness. He takes the word mithlihi from mithal to mean God's likeness. So for him, God has a likeness. Even though God is utterly transcendent, only expressible in apophasis, negative terms, due to his unlimitedness, Ibn Arabi says, viewing God only as such would itself be some sort of limitation. And one has to have in view both transcendence and immanence. So to say that لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ means that nothing is like unto his likeness is, for Ibn Arabi, a showcase of God's immanence. In that God manifesting all things is truly manifesting his likeness unto all things as various names of himself, or one could say various determinations, conditions, or limitations of himself. Nothing is like unto his likeness, because God's likeness is all there is. As we said above, imperfection, being synonymous with limitation, doesn't escape nor does it stand complement to perfection, as it is itself encompassed by it. So to say perfection lacks lack is also to say that it lacks the lack of lacking lack, i.e., perfection doesn't lack imperfection. In this view, Ibn Arabi usually says that due to this paradoxical nature, a true Gnostic is usually left in perplexion, hayra, and that is the true state of realization. Viewed from this metaphysical way, it is easy to answer the aforementioned questions. Yes, God is all good. But again, not only in the restricted moralistic sense, but in the metaphysical sense. The word good being used analogically to represent perfection. Evil, then, would be a deprivation of that good reflected in the moral landscape due to the inherent limitations of the various beings subjected to the moral framework. The deprivation being a result of their limitation, or rather, limited reflection or manifestation of perfection. The limited cannot help but be limited, And to ask why it is so is similar to asking why a thing is itself and not something else, or if a thing could be other than itself, and that is absurd, it's contradictory. Basically, perfection encompasses imperfection due to its perfection, and imperfection lacks full and total perfection due to its imperfection, and hence demonstrates deprivation by its very nature. And it is what it is, and can't be other than what it is. Period. As for how God can be all merciful and all just, or all manifest and all hidden, these two pairs being a few amongst God's many complementary attributes, it is important to understand that God being infinite isn't really attributed to and by anything in particular. God doesn't have attributes in the way things are endowed with attributes, which are distinct from their essence. For example, I can be called merciful, but mercy, as a concept, as a universal, can be seen as distinct from me. There is me as a human who, by demonstrating certain characteristics, is identified as merciful. For God, it's a different story. God being simple isn't composed of separate attributes. Rather, He is said attributes. And we are the ones who make categorical distinctions on how God is manifested in the various possibilities resulting to multiplicity. Going back to our opening statement on universal principles, we can't view them as distinct or in separation from the supreme principle. God is justice. God is mercy. God is manifestation. God is non-manifestation. God, by His perfection, is all universal principles, and by being so encompasses all things in reality. The Quran expresses this theologically as, quote, "To God belong all the beautiful names," end quote. Truly, the whole of reality is the manifestation, conditioning, determination of His infinite names, which are one in essence. In view of His perfection, God is seen in all things by the Gnostic, echoing Quran 2:115, quote, "To God belongs the East and the West, so wherever you turn, there is the face of God. Indeed, God is all-encompassing and all-knowing," end quote. The Gnostic, knowing that perfection is manifested in all things, sees perfection even in imperfection, as the imperfect is perfect as and in its imperfection. All things reflect perfection. All things reflect God. To quote the Islamic axiom, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un," surely we are from God and to God we return. So all things are reconciled in perfection. All things are reconciled in God. So in this sense, even imperfection for the Gnostic is reconciled within total perfection. I'd love to end the episode here, my friends, and I pray to God that we realize His total perfection. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.